From the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, chapter 8, beginning at verse 31. Then Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering, and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise be to thee, O Christ. This is a very rich passage, my friends, very rich indeed. And there are lots of things that one could choose to talk about. I'm not going to talk about "Get behind me, Satan." Not directly, anyway. I'm not going to talk about denying ourselves and taking up our cross, particularly as it applies to Lent. I'm not going to talk about the Son of Man being ashamed of those who do not proclaim him. I'm going to ask a question that only came to my mind late in the day as I pondered this passage, which is, why are we reading it now, on the second Sunday of Lent? Why have we jumped from the beginning of Mark all the way to chapter 8? From the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness to this passage. It occurred to me that it's a very sensible thing to do. Last week, Reverend Aileen did a stellar job engaging creatively with the temptation of Jesus. She talked about the things that prowl around us in the wilderness, the temptations and trials that surround us, how they can distract us. We have in this passage Jesus, yet again, being tempted, this time not of the devil, but of one of his friends. He explains to his disciples that the Son of Man, that is, himself, must undergo suffering, rejection, and death to be raised again from the dead. And Peter, who loves Jesus greatly, tells him off for it. He doesn't like it because, of course, what friend wants to hear one they love saying, "I must suffer and die"? This well-intended remark tempts Jesus. It says, oh, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. You don't actually have to suffer and die. It wasn't Peter's intent. But that was what Jesus heard. And so he rebukes him. "Get behind me, accuser, tempter, because your mind is focused on human things, but not divine things. You, Peter, are worried about me when what should concern you is the salvation of the world that my death will achieve, and one day you will understand this." So to emphasize his response, he calls the crowd and teaches a lesson about the value of perspective. from the temptation in the wilderness by the devil to the temptation in everyday life by a friend, we, like Jesus, are constantly bombarded with distractions, some of them well-meaning. But what is it to lose sight of one's calling? What is it for us to focus on earthly things rather than divine things? I think in this passage, the answer that's given is the loss of ourselves. When we become so wrapped up in the avoidance of suffering, wrapped up in following our own pleasures, wrapped up in stepping aside from what God has clearly put before us. When this happens, we lose sight of where we are going, we lose sight of what God has for us, and actually, on a profound level, we lose sight of who we're meant to be, or, to put it slightly differently, who we're meant to become. When the Son of Man, that is Jesus, returns in his glory with the holy angels, what he will want to see is a people who embraced their divine calling, who were not distracted by human things, but maintained a perspective on divine things, indeed on Jesus himself. It is my prayer that this challenge, this Lent, may become more real to me. I hope that I will be able to focus with greater clarity and greater certainty on the path God has put before me, even if it involves suffering. I pray that I will be able to say, even to a friend, if necessary, get behind me. I need to be focused on what God would have me do. And aren't we glad that Jesus had the strength to resist this temptation without his conscious following the path his Father had laid before him? We would be lost. So when we fail in doing it, which I'm sure we will from time to time, it is a cause to remember that Jesus did not, and to be thankful for his fortitude and his consistency, his strength that makes up for all our weakness. Amen.